Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel podcast. I invite you to close or gently focus your eyes and take a deep, cleansing breath. Inhale deeply, and as you exhale, release any tension or distractions. As you breathe in, visualize a radiant light filling you with clarity, purpose, and intention. With each exhale, release anything that no longer serves you on this path. In this moment, we embrace the duality of existence, the balance between the light and the dark, the challenges and the victories. We acknowledge that growth comes from our rebellion against the ordinary. As you continue to breathe deeply, remember that you are not alone on this journey. With gratitude for this moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes, prepared to embark on this podcast adventure. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Christine. I'm so excited you're here.
Hi, Kelly. Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
I would love for you to tell everybody anything you want them to know about you. What should our listeners know about Christine Roselle?
Okay, thanks for having me. First of all, this is going to be really fun. I've been excited about chatting with you. So my name is Christine Roselle, and I'm a writer and a coach. And I have been on my creative discovery journey for the past maybe 25 years. I'm 56, and I started really getting into self-discovery in my early 30s because I was raised in a narcissistic family system, and I just didn't know what I didn't know. And that included standing up for myself, believing in myself as a creative person and someone with a voice. And so it's really been just a long and fulfilling path, not without its ups and downs, but I have really just learned so much about myself and how I engage with other people in doing the creative work that I do.
Oh, amazing. Okay, we're getting right into it. I love this. I love it. So I want to know more about being raised in a narcissistic household and how that affected your voice and your ability to share about yourself or to put your ideas, your creations out in the world.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think being raised by, well, first of all, like the word narcissist and our like cognizance of what a narcissist is has really evolved and changed. And I think our ideas around it have really changed. But I think in my particular situation, it felt really normal to put somebody else first. I was literally enculturated to put everybody else before me because I would say like both of my parents, they were definitely narcissistic, but more than that, they were wounded as well. And so I think in my case, the narcissistic family system came from like a very long lineage of transgenerational trauma. And it just kept going and going and going. And I remember the big catalyst for me and what changed for me in terms of like awakening and awareness was I had a lifelong crippling ailment, undiagnosed ailment. And I would get these episodes of extreme vomiting every 4 to 6 weeks, starting from the age of 5 until like age 35. No one knew what it was. I went to every single doctor. I went to every specialist, you name it, and nobody could figure it out. And it was basically like this sensation of pain that you get in your stomach. And I couldn't stop vomiting. And so I eventually figured out that it was a stress-related condition caused by being trapped in the fight or flight freeze response and not being able to get out of it. And so literally I had lived like the first 35 years of my life in that, caught in fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
So once I figured that out, I was able to unspool it, and really like my entire life changed because of that. But being raised in that system, in fact, it was that journey of trying to understand like the dynamics of toxic families that led me to my first book, which was called the Happy Empath. And I could see very clearly that being highly sensitive and developing those highly sensitive qualities was really just a direct result of being raised in a toxic family system, because you are in survival mode and you're constantly like your awareness to something, your sensitivity to something depends on the other people in the system. So it's pretty layered and complex,
Wow.
Kelly.
It is, but you said it so beautifully, and you just really laid it out in such an accessible way. And I want to talk about your book, but first I do want to just acknowledge what you said about, what we think about as a narcissist. I think social media has put it out there as like, oh, this is what a narcissist is, or you might be a narcissist if, or your partner might be one if. And I will say, as a clinical psychologist, we are overusing that term and we're using it way too lightly. And yet, I think that it's so important to talk about what those behaviors are and call out what those traits are in a way that says, hey, you're not actually working well or living well right now because you're doing these behaviors that aren't you. Like, you are not a forever wounded person. You can, get healthy and get healed, but that these behaviors are hurting the people that you're trying to have relationships with. So yes, I just want to say, like, totally agree with you. In the mental health profession, people are using those terms way too lightly. Okay, that's off my soapbox for there. I just had to get on my soapbox. I do want to talk more about your book because I have read it, and it is one of the things that drew me to you. I read your book several years ago, and I want to call out something that I read in it, which was, you talked about getting into a cab and feeling the energy of the cab driver or whoever was sitting in the cab before you, and just being in the car and being really overwhelmed and feeling so like sick to your stomach. I can't remember exactly what it was that you said, but just that feeling of getting into a cab and noticing how overwhelming that was. And I read that and I went, oh my God, this happens to me every time. Every time I get into an Uber or a cab, I just feel an immediate sense of like not being safe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so many anecdotes I have about that until I really realized, like, the thing about being an empath and all that stuff, it's a frame. Like, you might identify as highly sensitive or whatever, but like, I really think of being an empath as not, like, I think originally that idea of being an empath, people were like, oh, you're psychic. No, that's not what it means. It just means that you can very easily feel the feelings of other people. And I don't think that that's like a very exclusive kind of thing. I think we all are that way. And back to the point of being raised in a narcissistic family system, you're literally enculturated. Like, your survival depends on being highly sensitive. And so you build that muscle. But the pros and cons are there, where you step out into the world and you can literally feel everything. You can feel it. Like the person behind you in the grocery store tapping their foot. You can feel the person's pulled up next to you in traffic, and it's all giving you this information.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one thing about being highly sensitive is that you have to figure out what is yours and what is somebody else's. And if you don't know, like I mentioned, being stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, you think it's yours. You even think the voices in your head that other people have put there are yours. So it's really important to untangle that yarn ball of what is your feeling and what are the feelings of other people. That's kind of like 101 for highly sensitive people. So if your listeners like don't identify as an empath, it doesn't matter. It's merely just a frame of so that you can understand how to be in the world. And when that publisher, they approached me because of a YouTube video that I created about being an empath. And I think what they were interested in at the time, so this is like 2019 or whatever, there was a lot of discourse about being an empath. And I think it kind of came from like the grand dame of empaths, Judith Orloff. And in her books, like I had read her books, but there was one thing about them that I just didn't relate to. And that was, she had described being highly sensitive in these environments and expecting everybody else to kind of accommodate her. I don't mean that negatively. I just meant that was her way of coping, where she would say, I'm highly sensitive. Can you please lower your tone and that sort of thing? And it's been my experience as a human that like it's really up to you to guide your own way you move through the world. And it's not really up or on anybody else, including your partners, your spouses, your kids, and all of it. Like it's up to you to have your boundaries and figure out what those are. I haven't found a more successful way to deal with being highly sensitive than that. Nobody was ever going to, even if I said, oh my God, you're so loud. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's up to you. So I think that was one of the reasons why I had two things going for me. That like, you get to decide how you move through the world that the publisher liked. And also, the other thing was I didn't have like a spirituality attached to it. Like I had I did research on empaths and they were like, I can tell you your past, present, and future. And I'm like, that doesn't resonate with me because I don't think of being highly sensitive or being empathetic as a divinatory mechanism.
Yeah.
I think of it as an embodiment of different sensations and learning how to cope with it.
Wow. Your messaging and framework around all of this is so empowering. I don't think I've ever heard people talk about highly sensitive person, HSP, and do it in a way that's so you've got this. Like it's okay. You can manage it. It's not something that weakens you or makes you so sensitive and, just need to be coddled through the world. It's something that you can use you can strengthen yourself around it. And in hearing you, it's just so obvious all the work that you have done.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for saying that. I want to mention one more thing that is very related to this idea around empaths, and that is the CPTSD. So CPTSD is different than PTSD. I'm sure you know, obviously, but maybe your listeners don't know the distinction where PTSD is usually created by one cataclysmic event. So like it happens in soldiers and things like that. CPTSD, complex post-traumatic disorder, is like trauma by 1,000 cuts. So if you are raised in a system that is just like unsupportive, abusive, you start to develop those qualities, and the range of qualities of somebody that has CPTSD can be very different. And I really recommend a book by Stephanie Fu called What My Bones Know. And she lays out like how her CPTSD unfolded. But the most important thing about her book is that it is her journey to discovery about CPTSD itself, but how to cope in the world with it. because if you don't know that you're sort of suffering from, it could be social anxiety, it could be, this just pervasive sense that people don't like me. Like I'm showing up in the world and trying to connect with other people, and I have the genuine sense that people just don't like me. That can be a symptom of CPTSD. I mean, there's many, but if any of this is landing and resonating, I would definitely encourage, because Stephanie Foo's book, because all of those qualities, they're sisters, CPTSD, being an empath, highly sensitive, narcissistic family systems, all of it. These things are related, especially for women.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've read Stephanie Foo's book as well. I think it's great.
Isn't it amazing?
I think it lays out all the work she's done, and both the challenges that she went through in doing that work and the roadblocks she hit, but also those little gleams of successes and letting people know she was a highly successful person from the outside. Like, Stephanie Foo, for those who don't know, was an NPR reporter and producer, and externally very successful, but internally had a lot of turmoil going on from a lot of childhood and adolescent trauma. So anyway, I also love that book. I haven't done this on here before, but I wonder if you could walk me through something as so I tend to not want labels, but I do think I fit into the empathic, highly sensitive person area. And one of the ways that my sensitivity comes up is in noises, and specifically misophonia and people chewing or crunching on things just really almost makes me feel sick to my stomach, like where I just want to curl in on myself. And so what you said about it not being other people's responsibility to fix my discomfort with things really, really lands hard, and it was kind of a wake-up call moment for me just then. But I wonder if you have any advice or suggestions for someone like me, or for me, in how you would kind of get through that, hearing other people chewing really loudly and wanting to say, please stop, please be quiet. And I don't want to make it other people's problems. I want it to be something I fix. So the floor is yours.
That's a really good question. And so I don't necessarily, I have the same issue, but it's not necessarily with how other people chew. It's just noise in general. And these headphones, I wear them around all day long. And when I'm sleeping, I wear earplugs, because the noises and the sounds are just too much. And I know that that physical, the physicality of a loud sudden noise, or even just like you're saying, noises that leave you feeling unsettled, they're unbearable. And unless you have this issue, just like don't know. So what I do is, so I would never, like I said, ask somebody to be different, but I learn what my issues are, and I accommodate myself. And then if I have to have boundaries, I have them. And if I do go into a situation where I know things are going to be loud or whatever, I cut it off at an hour. Like I always have an escape plan. In other words, like have a plan. So just knocking around my house and like the leaf blower outside, I have my noise canceling headphones on. But your question is really about what do you do when you have this issue, and you have to be in relationship to other people, and you have to be engaged with other people. And I would just say, know your limits, know for sure what is the trigger. So if it's hearing people chew, don't be around people that chew loud. Just know who they are and know the limits. And it's okay if you can't, it's okay if you have to explain it to people. It's your needs matter, and the way that you feel about something matters, but you have to recognize what those the triggers are and have a plan. One of the things that I said in my book was, when you're a highly sensitive person and you go out into the world, and it doesn't even matter if you're introverted or extroverted. I mean, you might be those things, but or one or the other. But when you come home and the door is closed, if you have a plan to decompress and you know what works for you, whether it's watching 20 minutes of crappy TV or listening to music or eating a snack, whatever it is, like if you have this series of steps for decompressing, and you understand deeply what works for you to kind of like clear things out, plan on doing that. Give yourself time to do that. It's really just about knowing yourself really, really well. And boundaries are the hard part for people, especially if you are codependent or if you, oh my gosh, I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live that just happened with Josh Brolin, but they had this skit about people pleasing. It was like a little therapy group about people pleasers. And I was just like, okay, I feel completely called out by this because people that deal with CPTSD or any kind of trauma, your tendency is to want to just be like, no, whatever you want, and like having a boundary is the hardest thing for non-confrontational people. You don't have to be like, like in your face about your boundaries, but you have to just like support yourself with your boundary. And that's where things get hard, but it's really important, especially if you like, I had this, kind of asshole ex-boyfriend that used to call me Miss Peculiarity because I had so many little, there was no language for, trying to cope with sound sensitivity and things like that back in the day. We didn't even know what depression was. There wasn't even discourse around depression. So we've come a long way, but yeah, I would say just know your limits. I wear my earplugs all the time, not just my headphones, but like if you can't wear headphones at dinner, right? If you're out at a restaurant, but you can put your earplugs in and you can still hear.
I might have to try that sometimes. I have those Loop earplugs, that brand Loop, and they allow sound in, but really filter out some of that superfluous noise.
Yeah.
And those are helpful. I might have to try those sometimes. Yeah. Because I think there's, with the category of HSP and empath, there's a tendency to want to put yourself in this little like safe box and to be like, okay, nobody can get me in here. I have all these peculiarities. I have all these things, and to want to be in that place. But I think there's so much beautiful work that can be done to allow yourself to experience that discomfort sometimes, and to then allow people in and experience that with you and just challenge yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's people that like, how there's all this dialogue about who has access to you. And I think it's like, as we learn more about ourselves, we realize like how precious we are and how, being our friend or being around us and engaging deeply is part of like what we bring and share, and not everybody deserves it. Not everybody has earned it,
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too. And I think your willingness to be uncomfortable around people that you truly cherish is a big part of learning yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I really want to ask you about, so you got to the age of 35, you started working on this health issue that was coming up, realized that, oh, this is also a boatload of trauma and that your body was holding on to it. How did you move through that time? Like, what did you do to get to where you're at today?
Yeah, that is a really good question because I have a very specific story about that. And I would say up until about 32, 33, in that zone, I was like the overgiver. I was the person who was constantly putting everybody else first. And I would have these, that was called cyclic vomiting syndrome, and it would trigger um, abdominal migraine. So it's like a migraine headache that you get in your stomach. And it was just agonizing. And so here it was, people pleasing, giving to people that just didn't deserve it and didn't reciprocate. And so I would get these episodes. And during one particular episode, I was laying on my couch, and the recovery was like, I was just like really exhausted the next day. And I just kind of fell into this dream state. So it wasn't like, it was that gray zone, that middle zone where you're not asleep in deep dream, but you're not awake either. So it was kind of like, that area of twilight processing. And I was sleeping, and I was having this kind of like dream, and somebody screamed in my ear so loud. They screamed, "Choose you." And it was so loud that I startled awake, and I thought somebody was in my house screaming in my ear. There was nobody there. It was literally my subconscious probably screaming at me like, for God's sakes, please wake up. Please do something for yourself. And so I'm like, my heart was racing. I was just like thinking someone had broken into my house, but it was really just like this, somebody screaming in my ear. It was like my soul was literally screaming and begging me to wake up. And so I was in that frazzled kind of condition. I remember going into my kitchen, and there was like a stack of mail sitting there. And I picked up this catalog. I used to live in Oakland, and I picked up this catalog that was from Berkeley Extension, which is kind of like Berkeley's night school. And I remember flipping through it with my thumb and closing my eyes, and I stuck my finger on one of the pages, and I opened up my eyes, and it was on Italian. So I was like, okay. So I signed up for that class, and I ended up taking like, three Italian classes in a row, not really knowing, but I was just so desperate to break the cycle, to break out of all the things that I had been doing up to that point. And the thing that happened, like after just doing this random Italian language classes, was I started thinking, well, what do I want with my life? And I was still really in that, like, that cyclical pain of every 4 weeks having these like 12-hour long vomiting episodes. And I remember thinking, like, if I'm going to be in this much pain for the rest of my life, I'm going to do it somewhere beautiful. So I own my home, not outright, but like, and I decided I am going to sell my house and all my stuff, and I'm going to move to Rome. And that's what I did. It took me a year to liquidate everything. And I know, it was
Oh my God,
crazy.
that's so amazing. My face
Yeah.
is just like, I can't control it. It's so cool.
Yeah. And pretty much I had a 3-bedroom house full of stuff, and I sold it all and gave away it all. And with everything that I gave away, I had to confront, why did I buy this? Why is this in my
Yeah.
life? And it was that in and of itself was a journey, but I did the same thing with, not, I don't want to say like people, but relationships. There were relationships that just like, they went out. I had to consider them and think about them, and then they went away, And so when I moved to Rome, it was all about me, and it was me in this brand new world. And I had to figure out like how to speak Italian, how to get around, how to pay a light bill. And at the time, like they had internet, but barely, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I chose me. I listened to my subconscious. And so I ended up moving to Rome when I was like 30. How old was I? Like 37, 38. I lived there in 2006, 2007. And, I did that. And you know what? My abdominal migraines went away. I haven't had one since. So it literally was a process. Like the story sounds like it happened overnight. I decided, but it was like, I had to like really fight to get there. And once I got there, it opened up a whole new situation of problems. But regardless, I chose something that I wanted to do, and I stepped into the life that I wanted to build. So that's how that happened. And that was really the beginning of the journey.
Wow. I just, that incredible moment, I've had that moment for myself too, of that incredible moment where you have to listen to that voice within you.
Yeah.
You have to. There's no other choice
Mm,
except to say, okay, fine. I will stop choosing other people. I will stop living for other people. I will choose
mhm,
myself.
mhm.
And then
The stakes are
everything that
too
happens from
high.
there. Yes. Yeah, we only get this one life, as far as
Yeah,
we know, or what
absolutely.
we remember.
Yeah.
We only get this one life.
Yes, yes. And it's like, I think especially for women, um, we are kind of collectively enculturated to be of service to other people and to put ourselves last. And
Yeah.
I'm of the mindset that, like, if you take care of yourself and your soul's needs and you are privileged enough to be able to do that, you will show up better in the
Mhm.
relationships that you have, and you will have more meaningful relationships. There's another book that's kind of like my Bible. It's called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and
Mm.
his motto is less but better. And I read that book, like, I don't know, years ago. And as soon as I finished it, I reread it because there was so many things in there just about, you know, uh, the choosing the things that have deep meaning for you,
Yeah.
and integrating them in ways that you've chosen and that are important. And so I sort of always think about that, and like getting rid of all your stuff. It's so painful. Like, it's so painful to like be confronted with all of the things that you have acquired through whatever means. And it just really makes you realize, like, when it comes time to bring new stuff in, it's so
Mhm.
painful to get rid of stuff that you're just like, I am only going to bring in the most special things, right? So,
Yeah, it makes you so much more discerning for what you have. And I have to imagine that letting go of all of those things allowed so much more space to open up, that you
mhm.
had the freedom, that you had the ability to just breathe and just be in all the space that you made for yourself.
Yep. Freedom is the word. I was like unshackled by belongings. And when during this experience, people kept saying, have you read Eat, Pray, Love? And I'm like, what? I hadn't read it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I was sort of having a parallel journey with Elizabeth Gilbert until I moved back to the States and actually read the book. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. She moved to Italy too.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
around that time. Yeah. Wow. What a small and weird world. Interestingly, I'm reading for the first time. I can't believe it took me this long, but I'm reading her book, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, right now.
Oh, you
And
are. I
really
love
trying
that
to,
book.
yeah, so far so good. And really just trying to, for me, step into this phase this year of releasing my creations into the world. And
Mm.
um I've gotten, a lot from her book. There was something I was going to say and now I can't remember it.
Was it about perfectionism? Was it about just that putting yourself out there and
Oh, I know what it was.
okay.
Is that the section of Big Magic that I read this morning was her talking about her journey in writing Eat, Pray, Love, and how she was like, I didn't write that for other people. I didn't write that because I realized for others that I had had this profound experience. I knew it was profound for me, and I had to
Mm.
write about my experience. And that was such a shift for me. And so it's so fun that you were having this parallel life experience and you're like, wait, what? She did what? I don't know. I was just living my life.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I remember her saying women would come up to her and be like, I was going to write that. And she's like, yeah, but you didn't. But, maybe people were really identifying with her journey. And the thing is, I
Yeah.
think there's something that calls to the female soul, that is just like, there has to be something better than this. It's kind of like that, the feminine mystique that Betty Friedan wrote in the
Yeah.
70s or whatever it was. And it's just like, when you're overly of service, overly giving, you ask yourself, there has to be something more. And then you want to know that part of your soul that is just like, well, who am I? Who am I at my core? And I think that men have been afforded that experience of discovery, not that they've all taken it, but our society is set up to support men in that discovery process in some ways, in most ways. And I think for women, there's something deeply, just like Elizabeth Gilbert, it calls to us. Who am I? What am I capable of? Like, what am I leaving out of this, experience? And I think that craving is something that all women can relate to. There must be something more.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You're so right. So these ideas that you get for your own writing and your other little creative, intuitive nudges, how do those come to you? How do you listen to them? How do you pay attention?
Okay, so I've been on like a writing journey for a while. Like, gosh, first of all, I never thought like if somebody had told me in my 20s, oh, guess what? You're going to be a writer. I would have been like, I don't, what? Like it just didn't really make sense. So coming to writing was really just a step. And I remember wanting deeply to be a romance writer. And I, like in 2010, I joined RWA here in Los Angeles. And every time I would sit down to write fiction, I would instantly get stuck and I couldn't do it. And so I had this dialogue in my head, like, I can't do this. This is not for me. And I realized that it was for me. But what was happening is, I read a lot, obviously. So there's another book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And in it, she describes that journey to mastery, which is 3 distinct stages. It's discovery, development, and deepening. And I think in that discovery phase where you start to fall in love with something, you want it to be a part of your identity. And you're like, I love painting and I love this thing. And you want to learn as much about it and you want to absorb it and take it on. And then there's a stage in that where you bump up against your questioning if it's for you, because all of a sudden it gets hard. And that was happening for me in writing. And really what it was I was bumping up against that development phase, which is really that phase of piano scale, swimming laps, and just the practice and the work of the thing that you love. So I think that people, especially traumatized people, we think that if we're not naturally good at something, that it's not for us, because we hit that development stage. And what happens is people want to go from that shiny discovery to the deepening stage. We want to be masterful at something. We want to be able to share our knowledge and be kind of in that elevated position of knowing. But really, the work, the difficulty is in that process and in the development phase. So what would happen is I would bounce off thinking that something isn't for me because I'm bad, and I go off into the next thing. So a lot of times you hear about people that are multi-passionate. Well, a lot of times it could just be, yes, you are multi-passionate. You like a lot of different things, but it could just be that you don't know how to deepen. You don't know how to get to that place, especially if you don't have support. So for me in the writing, it was really learning how to get over that wall and into the development. Without, like in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, she talks about like going on the road trip and your negative self-talk is allowed to come along for the journey, but it's not allowed to touch the radio. You get to decide how you're going to develop, and you bring along all of the things with you. You don't have to change who you are in order to deepen and learn something and grow. And so I think that was one of the big, really good takeaways from her book. So now, I've been in my writing journey for a while, and I've turned to fiction. And I like nonfiction is one thing where you're synthesizing ideas, and you can get ideas from everywhere, everywhere. But fiction is a little bit different because it asks you to develop a deep relationship with your subconscious, because you're making things up. And so if you don't, like in The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, she talks about filling your well and taking yourself on artist dates. And that's really what that is. It's nurturing the soul, reading books, going to art museum, whatever fills your soul. It's such a must when you're writing really anything, but in particular fiction, because you're asking your subconscious to come through for you. And if you don't nurture it and take care of it, you get to that development phase and you're just like, I'm terrible at this. I suck at this. My stories are terrible. Like all of a sudden that negative self-talk kicks in, and it leaves you swimming for your life rather than knowing that it's just a phase. It's just a part of the process.
Wow. You've stunned me to silence. This is so beautiful. Thank you for walking me through that process that you went through, walking us all through that process that you went through, and that bit about deepening and holding the space. I want to make sure that I tell everybody something. Part of the reason why, at least from a distance, we don't really know each other in the real world, but from a distance, why you are very special to me. So when I took over Happy Rebel in, what was it, 2019, I started making some changes and putting my own stamp on the company, and really saw that I had this long-term vision for it that I'm still cultivating, that this podcast is part of that. And I got a lot of pushback from people. I got a lot of really angry emails and social media posts, and some people said some really hurtful things. And you emailed and you said the kindest things, and you were so sweet, and you really were one of the people who carried me through that difficult time. And I just kind of kept your email and your kind words really, really close to my heart. And I just have to thank you for being the person that you are. It meant a lot to me.
Aw, Kelly. That's I'm like, I didn't have crying on my bingo card today at the podcast. But you know what? Like, that makes me so happy that my words mattered, especially during a time when you weren't getting a lot of support. And, I think there was probably something that I recognized, that here is this woman who is putting her neck out there for this vision. And she can see it, and maybe other people can't. People are just terrified of change, and I think it's really a projection of them wanting to do something different and about their lives, and they just don't know how. And so when they see somebody else fledgling and taking their baby steps out onto this long path, I think that the tendency to be very vocal, it's kind of like how Brene Brown talks about being in the arena. You stepped out into the arena, and somebody, people threw arrows at your head, and here you are. So I'll put this like as a symbol. I threw you a shield, and so you were able to, like, you do the Wonder Woman bracelets for people. I think it's really important to recognize, especially women supporting other women. Oh God, please think before you tear somebody else down. Discourse is always important, but savagery is really not going to get it done.
Yeah. We're all humans behind our computer screens, behind every message that we put out, every reel, every YouTube video, every podcast, everything. We're all actually real humans that are vulnerable and that have stories and that have walked through fire. And that is all a big part of the reason why I am doing this, is that everybody has a story that is worth hearing. Everybody has a journey that they have been on. And it is so, so important to hear those stories.
Yep. And now it's a pay it forward thing, because if you see somebody else who's a little bit further back on their path, aren't you more like liable to reach out to them and give them some encouragement too. Isn't it just like a divine golden thread?
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. And the process of working through everything that's come up for me with Happy Rebel has been really leaning into an abundance mindset and
Mm-hmm.
to work through all my blocks I had around scarcity and fear.
Mm.
And I'm just really nurturing that. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. Being able
Yeah.
to just sit with fear and be in discomfort is the keys to the kingdom. People always ask, like, how do you get confidence? I'm like, you kind of don't. Like, you just become okay with any outcome that is bound to happen, and then you do it anyway. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And so, like, knowing that is really just the key to being able to do and try something new and feel really silly and feel, like you need to be brave. It's that. It's just being okay with the outcome and doing it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where can people find you other than here on this podcast? Where can people find you and connect with you in the world?
So I'm mainly on YouTube. I post a ton of kind of long form videos on YouTube. I answer every comment. I am highly engaged. If you follow me, I'll probably follow you back. And then I also have a website, ChristineRoselle.com, and I have coaching packages. I have my books listed. I have, you can reach out to me there too. But I put out most of my thoughtful and creative content on YouTube, and it's just at Chris. I do Xteen Roselle is my handle pretty much across all social media.
Perfect. And I will share it as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wisdom and the work that you're doing and the ripple effect it's having in the world.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. It's just been just amazing.
Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.